Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining us from the world. My name is Daniel Fiorello. Some of you may know me as Goose from the Developer Student Club program, and welcome to this fireside chat with Chris Hales, Senior Product Manager from Flutter. Before we jump in, I do want to quickly remind you of some upcoming events. So give us just a few moments while I talk about some of the things you saw, as well as introduce our Discord platform if this is your first time joining us. So first of all, we have an amazing event upcoming. Google has different communities outside of the Developer Student Club group. One of them is the Google Developer Groups, and it is DevFest season. So one of the best things that you will be able to do is, join an upcoming Developer Student Club festival. I'm sorry, a Google Developer Group DevFest, right? And get connected with even more amazing content, upcoming. Right. Another amazing event, which is going to be upcoming on this channel as well, is going to be a chat about neural networks with Alex. That's coming up on November 27th. So one of the things that y'all have heard from us all before in this previous series is that, number one, you should like and subscribe to this channel for any and all of our amazing content, which is upcoming. One of the things we're really doing here is trying to make sure to give y'all the opportunity to get connected with amazing speakers, technology, and events. So like and subscribe and join us for future events. The other thing I'd like to do is, quickly plug our Discord, right? So for those who may not have joined us in the past, we have an amazing Discord community, which is actually going to enable you to get your questions answered in real time, as well as when you come back to watch any of our previous Developer Series videos. So join our Discord channel. You can find the link in the description of this video, as well on screen, bit.ly/DISCTOTV. Very important thing to notate, when you navigate to our Discord channel, you absolutely have to make sure to go to our rules channel. From there, you're going to need to scroll to the bottom and click the green check mark to gain access to the rest of our server. Pro tip, you should always read any agreements that you're signing up for. So please take a moment and read our community guidelines, as we will make sure to hold y'all accountable to them. Now, that being said, we have some amazing content to cover. So I would love to bring up Rohan, who's going to talk briefly before we jump into this fireside chat with Chris from Flutter. Hey, Rohan, how's it going?
Hi, Danny. It's going pretty well. It's pretty exciting, right? We have been waiting for this day for quite some time.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've been doing some amazing work over the past couple weeks. So before I drop off stage, what I want to do here is everyone in the chat, let's give a warm round of applause for Rohan, right? He's done an amazing job building all of this content, joining us week over week, connecting with y'all via Discord. And I just got to say, I've been blown away by the content and the teaching that you've done. So thank you once again. And without further ado, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Danny, and thank you, everyone. For all the folks who are following along with the series, it feels nice and that people are following along. So thank you for that. Now, I just mentioned it before. We're really excited because we've been waiting for this day for a really long time. Tonight, we aren't doing an app, as we mentioned last week. We're going to switch things up, spice up the session a little bit, try to move things around and see what we can get. And tonight we have an amazing guest. Now, usually when we say we have an amazing guest, we just mean, all right, they may be fine, they may be just an okay guest, but tonight I really mean it because we have someone from Google who's joining us, and not just anywhere in Google. I'm talking from the Flutter team. And again, not just anywhere in the Flutter team, we're talking someone who's high up in the Flutter team. And so it's my great honor and pleasure to introduce our guest for tonight, Chris Sells.
Hi, Rohan.
Hello, Chris. Very nice to have you on here. I can't stress that enough, how your presence means to the series. So thank you for your time. Thank you for doing this.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and just to set expectations, I don't know if I can be amazing, but I'll try to be okay, at least.
Chris, this is where you are, and this is where we are accustomed to. So even your worst is still way high. So we just like the fact that you took your time out to come to our series. So it's just pretty exciting. So now I know who you are, and pretty impressed by what you've done, and it's pretty amazing. But for all the folks who aren't here, you want to just mention what role what role do you hold in the Flutter team?
Yes. So I'm a member of our product management team. There's a number of us that our job is fundamentally to understand the pain points that developers have with Flutter, and it's a team effort, right? So we work with user experience research folks, engineering, marketing, to make sure that we understand what developers need for Flutter in various areas. And we work with engineers to handle the most impactful stuff first, get those in the hands of our customers as quickly as we can in our regular beta and stable releases, and then work with marketing to make sure that people know about the work we're doing. So fundamentally, my job on the Flutter team is to be responsible for the end-to-end developer experience. So make sure that developers have a great experience, whether they're aiming at mobile or web or desktop or a combination of all three.
I see. That's a very modest answer, because throughout your entire thing, you do not mention that you're the senior project manager. That's if I was holding that position, that would be probably one of the first things I'll shout it out on the street when nobody would even care. I'll just shout out that I work for Google, senior project manager, product manager. So
just to be clear, right? I have a manager just like anyone, and he's more senior than I am, and he does a lot of Flutter and Dart work. And I have a peer, Michael Thompson, on the Dart side, who's just as senior as I am, and I have a lot of people that on the Flutter team that I work with. It is by no means me who makes these things happen. It's a team effort.
That's very nice response. Very nice to hear the collaborative team spirit that you all share at the Flutter team. So that's very nice to hear. Now, before you even start getting on with the Flutter questions, there's one thing that I want to mention is mostly Chris. I think you are in the Google cloud of really smart folks. Folks who have been in the industry for a long time. This is, I think it's going to be something different for you. This is you're going to try to get to see what college students think, and how we use Flutter for learning, like how do we use Flutter for building our apps, and something from the college students' perspective. So so that all of us can relate with your college experience, because most primary audience is college students. So you want to tell us, what did you do in college? How was your time in college?
I loved college. I went to the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. Go Golden Gophers. I had a wonderful experience. I studied and attained a bachelor's degree in computer science. And I liked college so much that I kept right on going. I have a master's degree as well that I got while I was also working full time. I just have always been a lifelong learner. And so now I don't participate in college courses, but I'm always learning things. Recently, a couple of years ago when I joined the Flutter team, there was a great online course. I spent a bunch of time digging into that to get up to speed on Flutter. I'm always learning things, always trying things, always reading things. I'm always a college student. Think about it that way.
Yeah. Again, it's pretty amazing. And you said one thing, that you always are reading things, learning new things, but you also are writing new things. Am I correct? You have written a few books.
I've written a number of books back in when I was a contributing member to the Windows developer community. I have a blog that has been around since 1995. Literally thousands of blog posts on there over the years. Back in the days when we used to have magazine articles, I used to write magazine articles. I've written short courses and conference talks and keynotes, and that is my favorite way of communicating, is the written word.
Yeah, you said you have a blog. I also have a blog. It's this blog of pictures of me shirtless, but apparently that nobody goes to that blog, and it's a pretty good reason why.
Sure.
Yeah. Now that we've actually gotten to know you, and I think all of us can relate to you in some way. We've got to know that you were a college student, and how you experience, what was your college experience. I think now let's get into some Flutter questions. Now, when we started our series, we mentioned one fact of our interpretation of what Flutter is. So we spoke about how Flutter isn't really a tool to build apps or programs for a platform. Rather, it's building apps and programs for the screen. The screen could be an iOS screen for an app for an phone for an iPhone. It could be for an Android phone, or it could even be for the web. So rather for the screen, rather than the platform. That's how we defined it. So what is your interpretation of Flutter? How would you tell what Flutter is to people?
Yeah, I really love that definition, right? Which is, and by the way, it warms the cockles of my heart to hear you describe Flutter that way. We work really hard to make sure that you can write your Flutter code and then choose your platforms later, right? So, most people sit down and they're like, oh, I need a mobile app, but, I'm not a mobile developer. I've heard about this Flutter thing. They fire up Flutter and suddenly, 5 minutes later, they're mobile developers, right? And I hear from customers all the time that say that that's a big deal for them. Or they're web developers when they weren't, or they're desktop developers when they didn't used to be before. And that's because Flutter, as you say, allows you to, build your app and test your app on a number of devices, and then you can choose what you target later on. And then you can expand that later on, right? You can start with a mobile app and say, oh gosh, I'd love to have this on the web or on the desktop. Now, it does matter what kind of platforms you target for a couple of reasons. One reason is, of course, you have to keep in mind, the size of the screen, the kind of form factor you're after, right? Is it a small screen, a medium-sized screen, bigger screen, right? Because those dictate how you build your interaction model with your user and how you do navigation. Likewise, you have to keep in mind the input modes that you're going to support, right? It could be primarily touch. It could be touch with a soft keyboard. It could be mouse and keyboard. That matters. Plus, there are some platform-specific idioms, right? For example, if you're on a desktop, you want somebody to be able to double-click, on a file in the File Explorer or in the Finder and open up your app, right? So, there's always idioms. There's always integration points with the underlying platform. That said, what we find is that the bulk of most Flutter apps are not those integration points, but rather, as you say, the screen and the interaction with the users and the animations and all of that stuff that make up the guts of an app. And then you can choose, hey, I want it to work here or there or whatever. So I guess the really long answer to your question is, what is Flutter? It's just a really great way to build apps, beautiful apps, native apps, fast apps, and then you can choose the platform you like later.
Absolutely, that's pretty amazing. So we as you mentioned, we start out mainly with mobile development, and we don't really think about what the platform is. And once you have coded your app and tested it on any one platform, you can easily export it to other platforms and to web or any of the other cool platforms apart from mobile, which we're going to talk about soon. But there's one thing is throughout the series, mostly in the start, we mentioned on how our favorite feature for most of us is hot reload, and how Flutter decentralizes or separates the visual part of it along with the states. So the code, the visual part of it is just like a canvas, and your ink is another layer that you can just switch on and off the canvas. And hot reload, it helps you to see those changes in real time. That was a feature that we loved. So you are a very professional Flutter developer and developing new things in Flutter. What is your favorite feature of Flutter that makes you just love Flutter more than any other technology out there?
So let me just start by saying I agree with you. Hot reload is amazing. It changes the way you write your code. I remember a talk I gave not too long ago with Flutter, where I did Flutter Create, and I got the standard counter app, and I opened it up in Visual Studio Code, and I started it under the debugger, And I coded live for that audience for 45 minutes. And we never had to do anything but hot reload. I was just typing away, and I turned it from the counter app into a tic-tac-toe app, and the audience was helping me, right? I was drawing the crisscross, of the background of the tic-tac-toe app. And, you have to draw one at, X, and then X times 2, and then Y times 2, and it's got to go across the screen. And I was doing all of that interactively, and you could see the lines kind of go all kitty corner on the screen. And they were, I was just doing the math interactively while the audience was shouting out numbers to me, right? I mean, this fundamentally changes how you build your app, right? Because when you're done, it's right there. There's no,
Right.
You don't have to wait. You can just see it. So I'm a fan of hot reload, and there's a reason. I mean, it is a game changer. But I guess if I had to say my favorite feature besides hot reload, because everyone loves hot reload.
Yeah.
It's hard to choose. I'm a fan of the composability model. I'm a fan of the reactive model, of the way the data flows through the system, and that whole and gosh, the APIs are so well designed, and they're so easy to use, but still so powerful and so flexible. But I'd say that probably the one that leaped to mind is I really love how you write tests in Dart and Flutter. The unit test framework, I've done a lot. I spent a decade doing .NET and a decade doing C++ before that. And I've never seen a unit test framework that was so low on ceremony, but so easy to write, but so powerful and flexible at the same time. I'm a test-driven developer. I like to write my tests first. And so it's such a joy to do that with the unit testing in Dart. So I'd have to say I'm a big fan of that feature.
Absolutely, testing in Dart and in Flutter in general is quite a delight. That is pretty amazing that you mentioned that. We have a quick question from the audience that we want to feature on the screen. We can just have that on, and then we could talk about that. So Kasba, he's a pretty active member in our series, and he's asking a question is, how will Flutter compete with Kotlin native?
So I certainly I'm a fan of Kotlin, the language. In fact, null safety is a feature we're adding to Dart. Kotlin has that feature as well as some other features. We recently, maybe a year ago, added extension methods to Dart, which obviously Kotlin has. I'm hoping we'll get data classes here pretty quick. So there's a lot of really great stuff in Kotlin. What I find I like about Dart is that it is optimized for one scenario, which is client-side coding. So one of the things that allows you to do is you get to narrow the scope of your language features. For example, async and await is a fabulous and super simple way to do client-side, multi-threading, multi-processing, waiting on the network, waiting on the hard drive. And Dart and the libraries and Flutter use that extensively all the way through. Kotlin has a much more general purpose features built in, and you can build async and await. You can build whatever kind of multi-threading you like in Kotlin, and it's far more flexible because it also has to be a server-side language, right? So you have to support kind of both kinds of things, and so the simplicity in Dart is really nice because it is primarily for building UI. So that focus helps make sure that we keep Dart as simple as possible while still bringing new features online at a reasonable pace.
Perfect. That's a pretty amazing answer. That's pretty nice to know the differences between Kotlin and Dart. We have another question again coming in from Kasba again. He's asking, is there anything that we know about Fuchsia? Now, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correct, but if I'm not wrong, is this the operating system that Google is working on?
So yes, Fuchsia is a general purpose operating system that is being built as an open source project that anyone can see and use and try. You have to be, pretty hardcore operating system geek at this point to take advantage. But you can download it, you can clone it, you can fork it, you can provide pull requests, you can build it and run it, and emulators, and in fact, if you go to fuchsia.dev, all the current information we have about how to use it and take advantage and contribute is all available there.
Perfect. And we have another question, a quick question coming from Lens. If you can just feature that on the screen. Lens Paul, he was an ex-DSC lead again, and he's asking, any advice on entering the industry as a Flutter developer, as a college student, or maybe as a freelancer?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in general, I've been through the cycle a number of times. Ron, you said, I'm experienced, which is just another euphemism for old. So I've seen this cycle of technology a few times. I remember when mobile first came out, right? Everyone was building desktop apps, and then, the iPhone came out and smartphones in general, and people started caring about building mobile apps. And the enterprises tried to ignore it for as long as possible. And then it became, there's this idea of bring your own device and, building apps that people could just install on their own devices, and therefore work from home at 3 a.m. And we wanted to enable that. So the way the cycle works is, these big enterprises who hire all the professional devs, or some large number of professional devs, they tried to ignore it first. And then they were like, well, we have to start, really caring about mobile developers or mobile applications. So, we're going to first start reaching out and use consultants and contractors and hire out this work. And hopefully we can just do it and ship it and, wash our hands of it. But really, that's not what happened. What happened was that was like their first version of the app. Then they really needed to have full control. So that's when they started hiring their own set of mobile developers. And there's this cycle that you go through. And now every company has, mobile developers doing stuff, right? That's just they just all do. So where we are in that cycle, and as I observe, is Flutter, we released it not even 2 years ago. Next month, it'll be 2 years. So it's still a relatively young technology, although, we're constantly flabbergasted, honestly, in terms of how many Flutter developers we have, how many Flutter apps there are in the world. But even so, it's relatively young. So what I've observed, we seem to be at the stage where there's a lot of consulting firms that are popping up to do development, and then enterprise companies are hiring the consulting firms. So that they're at that stage. They're not quite at, everyone needs Flutter developers. They're at the stage of, let's dip our toes in the Flutter waters. Let's see if this is really a thing. So all of these consulting firms are popping up around the world. So that's where I would expect for another couple of years for the bulk of the hiring to happen. And then after that, everyone will decide, okay, that's version 1 of our Flutter app, but we really need more control and we want to do more things with it. It's more efficient for us to hire our own Flutter developers, and then the floodgates open. And that's where I think we are in the cycle.
I see that. That's pretty amazing to hear. This actually brings me to another question is, Flutter, as you said, is a rather new technology that's come up. And most companies, if I'm not wrong, that have started much before Flutter was developed, they've already built all their products in other technologies. So for web development, they might have used traditional web development technologies, or for mobile apps, they might have built with 2 separate teams for native Android and native iOS. And now with Flutter coming in as a new player on the playground, do you feel? My question is, with all these companies actually having their apps built natively, would there be enough opportunities for us coming in as Flutter developers? What do you think on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's really kind of 2 broad categories of people using Flutter today. One broad category are those people that are starting from scratch. They're greenfield, right? And these are agencies and consulting firms and startups that have a small or no code base, and they're getting started with the latest and greatest technologies, and they want to go hard and fast. And Flutter is fantastic there because you can just start up a new Flutter project and go really far. You were showing off the kind of apps that your students were building in only 6 weeks, and being able to get to that level of competency in 6 weeks is pretty darn impressive. And I'm sure a lot of that has to do with how amazing you are, Rowan. But Flutter, right? I mean, Flutter in general is a very productive UI framework for people. The idea is that you can be super productive and go from zero to a real working thing if you can start from scratch in Flutter. But the other kind of broad category is very much, hey, these are enterprises. They build their businesses. They build their apps that drive their businesses. They have been working on them in some cases for 10 years, right? As long as we've had smartphones. And so for them, a lot of them are, they have an existing app, a mobile app, Android app, iOS app, both, right? And so they don't want to start over unless they really have to, right? And so Flutter has two things that are useful for them. One, if they want to build screens in Flutter and reuse them between their iOS and Android, they absolutely can. We have add to app. And they can make that work and reuse that code between their apps. Another, though, is either we can catch them on their cycle, because generally there's a 3 to 5 year cycle, and we catch them when we're tired of all the problems we had with the own technology. It's time to pick a new one, right? And so we always want to be working on that pipeline of customers that are ready to pick brand new things and start over from scratch. And that happens in enterprises too. It just happens a lot more slowly than it would in your typical startup. But the other thing that we're seeing people pick up Flutter for is maybe they leave their existing app alone, but they build a whole new kind of side app, a new kind of vertical. I'll give you eBay as an example of that. eBay has had an app in both app stores for Android and iOS since those app stores existed, right? So they have a long history. But when they wanted to build a whole new vertical, they called it eBay Motors. They were able to hit the ground running and go with a brand new app for a new vertical optimized for one set of customers with Flutter in less than a year. And so Flutter is amazing for that kind of thing. And then once enterprises use Flutter and they're like successful and they built this amazing app, then they go, wow, what else could we be using Flutter for? And then, when they come around to, hey, gosh, we've had maintaining the same code base for 5 or 10 years, maybe it's time to pick something else. Flutter's there. They got Flutter developers, so on and so forth, right? That's how that cycle goes.
Absolutely. Once we start using Flutter, it's really hard to stop. Right? Yeah, it's once you've got, it's like a drug, I would say. It's once you've got them hooked, then there really is no stopping. Now, this actually brings me to a thing where people are always looking for new technologies to use, and Flutter has a similar technology called React, as people might have heard. Now, React and Flutter, they're quite similar in many ways. Both of them are cross-platform. Both of them, you can build for mobile and for the web. But the complaint, or just something that people observe, is that Flutter uses Dart and React uses JavaScript. Mm-hmm. And JavaScript is a language which most people are already acclimated with. Mm-hmm. And so they might think that I want to learn a new technology. Hey, here's one that uses a language that I know, as compared to Dart, which might seem really new to them. Now, when people start using Dart, people always love it. It's quite amazing. But sometimes people could feel intimidated by it, when they don't know about it. Mm-hmm. So what would you, what's your opinion on this? Why should people, use Dart or use Flutter rather? What makes Flutter stand out?
Yeah. So the one of the things about Dart that is so wonderful when it comes to Flutter development, I already mentioned, right? It's optimized for client-side development, right? So it is focused on being the best possible language it can be in terms of static binding and lightweight runtime and hot reload. And in fact, another thing, just Flutter, when Flutter was first developed, it was, an engine. The engine is built in C++, right? And it interfaces to Skia and that text layout engine, and it's got a tiny little runtime. The Flutter team could have chosen whatever the language they want, and so they looked, and what were the set of languages available at the time, and what Dart gave them was something that no other language could give them, which is not only does it support hot reload, right? There's a virtual machine, right? So you can do sub-second hot reload, but it also can generate x86 code, ARM code. It can generate JavaScript code, right? It had all these backends that allowed you to get native code at native speeds, depending on the platform you choose. So this combination of fantastic developer experience and fantastic end user experience is something no other language provided. And so, and Dart is a big reason that Flutter is so successful, because it provides the best of both, right? Both that dynamic, super fast, super productive developer experience and tight, fast native code.
That's a pretty amazing point you mentioned, is how it compiles natively. So there's no interpretation, you get native speeds for whichever platform you use. And that's pretty amazing. Nice to hear. There are a few questions coming in from our audience. People, they want to ask you questions, Chris, as I would expect. Dalton is asking, what do you think is one of the best selling points of Flutter? Why should new developers look at learning Flutter?
So we've mentioned a bunch of them already. Hot reload is a game changer. I'm a big fan of the unit testing framework. Digging in a little more, what does it mean to be composable, reactive, declarative, right? These are three characteristics that modern UI frameworks are adopting now. For example, if you looked at Swift UI, right, or Jetpack Compose or React, right? I mean, these are modern UI frameworks, and they're composable, and they're declarative, and they're reactive. And what does that mean? Well, declarative means, hey, I'm going to lay out my UI and describe it, and I'm going to hand it over to the computer, and it's going to do the rendering. I don't have to place every pixel or every line or every color. I can just say, I want a box this big, and I want it to be this color, and I want it to interact with the user in this way, and the computer can just take care of it, right? So that's what declarative means. What does reactive mean? Reactive means that I don't have to write my code in an imperative way that says, I'm initializing, therefore I'm going to draw it this way. Oh, this part of my UI is now, invalid. I have to figure out the most optimal way to rebuild that part of my UI. Instead, what I can do is just write one function that looks at whatever the current state is, whether it's the first time through the function or the 100th time through the function, it doesn't matter. I can write that function and can say, okay, based on this state, here's what the UI of this widget should be. And then what'll happen is whenever your data changes, there's a trigger that says, oh, call that build function again. Let's get an updated version of what that widget thinks it should look like right now. And so the underlying Flutter engine, a lot of what it does is it says, oh, well, here's what it currently is, and here's what the new stuff is. Oh, and these two things are different. So I'll go and mess with those, and I'll leave the rest the same. Okay. And so you get to think of it at a very high level of abstraction, and Flutter does all of the optimization to make sure that we're only redrawing the bits that we want based on the data changes, right? That's what it makes it reactive. And then composable is, it turns out there's about 300 widgets in Flutter. And these are the kind of basic building blocks. And you can be as high as I want a text editor and plop it in, or as low as, I want to, have this part of the canvas that I draw on myself, and everything in between. And those widgets, then when you build your own custom widgets, as opposed to having to draw everything, right? Instead, you can say, oh, this is an autocomplete widget, and it's going to have a text box, and it's going to have a drop down, and it's going to have this UI, and it's going to have this behavior. And what I can do is then I can build the behavior on top of the set of widgets that provide the UI that I want from lower level widgets. So I get to build higher level widgets from lower level widgets. And the combination of those three make it a modern UI development experience, and it makes Flutter developers roughly 2x as productive as other kinds of application developers. And those are pretty good selling points.
Absolutely, I like this thing of what you mentioned, and what Flutter is it's just it has these templates that we use of widgets, and we as developers just talk about the behavior of it. So we don't actually have to go behind the scenes and implement it. Most of it is done. So I think the learning curve, or the time it takes to learn, is quite lesser when compared to learning other technologies. So that's pretty amazing. We have another question from the audience. David, he asks, if you are recruiting an intern, and should I mention an intern, like I'm going to apply soon. So if you were recruiting an intern, looking at projects in their resume, what would a project written in Flutter demonstrate, as opposed to learning another programming language?
Well, I mean, obviously, somebody who's writing in Flutter is already more intelligent than your average developer because they picked Flutter, right? I mean, so already they're a cut above the rest. Actually, I'm going to say something controversial potentially, which is when I look at projects from potential developers that I'm going to add to my team, I don't really care what framework they picked. I don't really care what language they wrote it in. What I care about is, did they understand whatever technologies they chose? Did they make good engineering decisions? Did they write good code? Do they have tests in place? Do they have a release cycle? Do they respond to user feedback? What I'm looking for is less of a expert in any particular technology and more of a software engineer that understands two things. One, the life cycle of a piece of software, right? You can just write the code and be done, right? There's a whole lot more to software engineering than just that. And two, do they really understand what they were doing? And the reason that's so important is because as software engineers, the technology is always changing. There's always new technologies. There's always new techniques. There's always a better way to do what you're doing. And so in a very fast-moving environment, I said I was a lifelong learner. I think all software engineers need to be lifelong learners because our world is changing so fast that I'm looking for somebody who, whatever they chose, understood what they were doing, with the idea that as they pick up new technologies in the future, which they must be able to do, they will understand those and make good engineering decisions about those new technologies.
That's pretty amazing. So, I mean, you've shared secrets, I would say, of what people look for. And while you were, I'm looking at the camera, but unbeknownst to you, I'm actually taking notes. I've written down everything that you have said, and I'm pretty sure people are going to watch the recording of this. This 1 minute mark is going to be the most watched 1 minute mark of the entire video. Chris spills the beans of what people look for in candidates. Pretty amazing. We have one more question coming in from the audience. Rafael, again, very active member of our series, he's asking, what are some of the advantages of using Angular for web development instead of using Flutter for web?
Yeah, so Angular, is another Google technology, and I've written a bunch of Angular code myself before I was spoiled by Flutter. I'm a fan of Angular. The thing that's really great about Angular is that if you're already an HTML, CSS, and JavaScript developer, and you're building a wide range of things that you can do on the web, multi-page, single page, apps, documents, right? Angular is meant to augment what you already know and provide a bunch of services for software engineers. And you could use it to build any manner of things, and it is made to help you get the most out of building web things for the web. And so there's a lot of advantages there because it is optimized for that one platform.
Yeah, absolutely. This is pretty amazing, and that actually Rafael asked a really good question, because that just segues into my one of the questions that we had planned to ask is now a question that we just touched upon previously actually is there are some people who have already used traditional web development technologies to build their websites or similar programs or apps, and would you recommend them to switch over to Flutter for building their web component of their app? Is Flutter stable enough, or what would you recommend?
It's interesting. So as a PM, I don't get to write very much code as part of my day job, but I'm also an engineer at heart, and I love writing. I literally do love writing Flutter apps, and so I have a bunch of samples that I put up on GitHub, but I have an actual little side project evenings and weekends where I'm writing a bunch of Flutter code and having a good old time. And I'm writing it to target the web because the distribution model is second to none. I want to do deep linking. I want I want to be able to post links to content in YouTube or Twitter and have the whole thing go viral and win the lottery, right? I mean, in terms of users and et cetera. And I'm targeting the web for that. Now, the thing that Flutter for web is really great at is building apps, right? I mean, I can develop on the desktop. I can deploy to the web. I can target it to Android if I want to, or whatever. But it's fundamentally an app experience. Whereas, of course, the web does lots more than just apps, right? There's documents and multi-page stuff, and there's a lot you can do for the web. So the question boils down to, unfortunately, as these questions often do, it depends. Depends on what you're trying to do. If you're building, a highly interactive widget that you'd like to put on an existing web page, Flutter is fantastic for that. If you're building a whole progressive web app or single page application that really looks and feels like a web, it just happens to be hosted in the browser, Flutter is fantastic for that. But what I would recommend is to think through what you're trying to build and try it. See. I mean, the good news is with Flutter is it's very fast to build pretty much anything. So give it a try, see if it's a good fit. And if it's not, that's okay. You haven't spent a bunch of time. You can try other technologies. And if it is, great, you're done. Ship it, right? Either way, no harm, no foul.
Absolutely. I like this thing where you said where it depends on the use case, the it depends part of it. And that essentially is what what Flutter is this great powerful tool, but that's perfect for building this app kind of thing, even on a website, building this app that you can have as opposed to a proper website. So it's definitely an innovative thing to build apps for websites. Now I want to transition over into the learning aspect of Flutter. People might have heard a lot about how amazing Flutter is, and you have spoken quite highly of it. People are excited, but now people want to learn about Flutter. So what would you recommend is the best place for college students who are taking college classes at that level to start learning Flutter? What's the best way you would recommend?
Well, based on what I saw right before we went live, I would say the content you put together is clearly the best place to start. And your students have been through that. Actually, sounds like they already got a great running start on Flutter. If you want more, there is a great new encyclopedia-sized book from Felix and Remy and other members of the Flutter community. 200 pages on Dart, just to start with all the latest and greatest. Lots of Flutter, hard-won Flutter knowledge. That's a fantastic book. I would also recommend Flutter.dev itself. We have a developer relations team that is second to none. and a docs team, and they have put together amazing samples, amazing documentation. They have a great YouTube channel. That content is a bunch of fantastic samples, right? I definitely would dig through that. Code Labs to take you step by step. I mean, they have done an amazing job, and they're always making it better. It's always being improved. And then there's an online course that I myself took, so I'm kind of biased. But the Flutter course from App Brewery is it's like $10 because the Flutter team subsidizes it. It's 25 hours or so of online content. Kind of goes soup to nuts across all kinds of things that you're going to run into as a Flutter developer. I really recommend that class.
Absolutely, that's pretty amazing. And interesting you mentioned that, because that is the way I also started to learn Flutter. The course from App Brewery. So that was pretty amazing. And again, big thank you to you for subsidizing it. Because if it was, yes, it was more than I probably wouldn't. I'm the kind of guy who would, when my shampoo gets over, I'll pour more water in the shampoo bottle and shake it to get more shampoo. Yeah, that's kind of me. I wouldn't go out of my way to spend. Now, there's one thing of Android development. There is this associate Android developer, this proper certification. That people once they feel that they're proficient enough in Android, they try to get their certification, and once they get it, it's an approval that they are well versed in Android development. Is there any such certification for Flutter development? And how would you recommend people certify themselves, to probably show to employers or to show that they know the skills that are needed to get employed as a Flutter developer?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been asked that a couple of times before. Mostly the folks I've been hearing ask are developers, right? People that want to get certified and put that in their resume. And I'm a Google certified Flutter developer. We don't have that program today, and we don't have any concrete plans for doing it tomorrow, although I have it in the back of my head as something that we might need in the future. And the signal to me that we would need it is if I have a bunch of employers come to me, a bunch of companies, and say, hey, we're hiring a bunch of Flutter developers, but we're finding a bunch of them don't really know what they're doing. Could you please pull together a certification program? And at that point, then we'll know we'll have, it's not enough for developers, right? It's really kind of a push and pull thing where employers need it as well. At that point, we pretty much won't have a choice, and we'll have to pull something together.
I see. This is pretty amazing. Looking forward to it. If it comes out, this is probably one of the first things on my bucket list. I'm going to go out for that. Even if it's not subsidized, I'm going to go out for that. Now, when people they start learning a new technology, how good the technology is, we always get into problems, and they could get really frustrating at times. And people could seem to feel that this technology is not for me. So, what's the best place you would recommend if people ever face problems with Flutter or with get some error, apart from the basics of just Googling it, as we always do? Is there something that you would recommend people should do when they face problems in their development, when they're developing apps?
Two things. Certainly, Google.com. I don't think I'm the only software engineer on the planet who uses that as kind of the first line of defense. This long, potentially confusing error message. Hey, is there something on Stack Overflow or some forum or something that I can go, oh yeah, no, I get it. I start there like pretty much everyone does. But the second thing I would recommend is experience and time, and give yourself permission to kind of do deep dives and experiments and actually learn kind of how Flutter works well enough to be able to say, oh, right, that error message makes sense to me. I see I was doing the wrong thing, and that is not how Flutter works. And if you can't get the quick hit from the Google search, then you're faced with actually understanding the technology. And that's where the courses and the books and the documentation all come into play, right? I don't think I've ever picked up a piece of material on Flutter in the last 2 years that I've been on the Flutter team where I didn't learn something. Sometimes I learn a lot, sometimes I learn a little bit, but I'm always learning something about Flutter and how it really works. and you begin to develop an intuition about what works and what doesn't, and how Flutter is put together, and that helps you to understand the error messages. And that's not just about Flutter, right? Every technology is like that, right? Being able to really dig in and understand the architecture and the goals and principles of the engineers who pulled the whatever library or framework you're using together, that is going to go a long way. That just core basic understanding. And the reason I bring that up is because I see a lot of developers trying to skip that, and it just doesn't work.
Absolutely, it just sometimes just doesn't work. There's now Flutter is always developing new things and coming out with some new releases that makes people just go wow. So you mentioned the book by Remy. So when he released the provider package, totally changed the way on how to do state management. And I'm bringing that up because we actually implemented the provider package to do state management in one of our apps. So people are familiar with it, and I'm pretty sure we all loved it. At least I can say for me, it was a huge. It totally made the state management pretty easy. So you're working on the Flutter team, of course. Is there something that you can share on what's the next wow feature that's going to be released by Flutter?
We have our hands pretty full right now on 3 big wows, which I think I mentioned at the beginning of the show. We think null safety is a pretty big wow. The ability to be able to write your code in a way that you can completely avoid an entire class of runtime exceptions when you're trying to dereference null. We think that's a pretty big wow. And it's all upside too, because it's statically compiled. So not only do you make your code more robust, when you squeeze when you move all of your code and your dependencies to null safety, you'll get something called null soundness, where the compiler doesn't have to generate code to check for null. So your code will actually be smaller. Gesundheit. I don't know what that was. So, that is just a win across the board, right? Win, win, win. So we're pretty excited about that. A second wow, a couple of different new wows. Bringing the web platform around. I mean, being able to write a single piece of code that goes on mobile and web, and of course the desktops as well, right? I mean, single app that can adapt to 6 different platforms across different idioms and different form factors. So we think web and desktop are pretty wow as well.
Absolutely, the Flutter web thing, it's a pretty big wow, and we all love it, and it's just pretty amazing. We have a few questions coming in from the audience, and Dylan, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, he's asking, I saw a while back a Flutter intern featured on the widget of the week. Does the Flutter team typically take a lot of interns? And if so, what kinds of things do they typically work on?
Yeah, I mean, we love interns on the Flutter team, especially now when folks working from home, working on a GitHub-based open source project, you can as easily do it from home as anywhere else, right? So we love interns. We had a lot of interns this summer. At Google, the interns build real things, right? At Google, we want to make sure that our interns are building things that we care about. They're not like getting coffee, right? I mean, they're building real features. We have something in the Flutter inspector called the Layout Explorer. That was built by an intern. We just shipped a new feature for tracking and measuring app size and what are the various components that go into an app size, and a visualization of app size that is beautiful, all built in Flutter, all built by an intern, right? Our interns do real stuff, cool stuff.
That's pretty amazing to hear. And also the app size, that's pretty exciting that interns are actually working on that, because app size is something that if it's too high, then people seem to uninstall the apps, and that I feel is something that as a developer want to reduce the app size whenever possible. So that's pretty cool to hear. And another question coming in from the audience, Edwin, he asks, as a seasoned product manager, what are the most important factors you consider when prioritizing new features to build?
Yeah, I can see, Edwin, you're wearing a coat and a button-up shirt, clearly on the product manager path. And I assume the word seasoned is just another word for old, which is fine. I would say that there's a lot that goes into prioritizing features, product features. First and foremost, it's about what are really customers being blocked by. What is stopping them from using Flutter or being successful with Flutter, right? The goal for any product is always to have more users, and whether they're paying users or free users, that depends on the kind of thing you're building. But you always want to get it to the largest set of people you can get to, and so those blockers become really important. Because if you can fix a blocker for one customer, hey, maybe it's a super important customer and good for you. But if you can fix a blocker for 100 customers or 1,000 customers or 100,000 customers, suddenly you're opening the door to a whole new class of users that you didn't have before, right? I mean, that's where you always want to aim first, right? How can you unblock a huge set of users, the biggest you can unblock? The second kind of category of things falls into we've got a bunch of existing users that are unable to be successful for whatever reason. They're trying to do a thing, whatever it is, and they can't. And so, not only do we want new users into our products, whatever they are, but we want to keep the users we've got. And so we want to make sure that, not only are the new users can do the things they want, but the existing users, when they have new requirements or new things they want to do, or maybe something used to be great and simple and wonderful and now sucks, right? These are the kinds of things that we want to fix. And then after that, it's, hey, let's add new features to make sure they're happy, and let's fix a bunch of issues to make sure that that they're having a good experience and things are working well the way they expect, and the normal kinds of things that you would always expect to be doing constantly. But I would say first and foremost, blockers, and then anything that is stopping your existing customers from being successful. Those are the two big ones I would say as a PM.
That's pretty amazing. Now, I'm going to ask one of the most important questions. This question will probably make all the other questions I've asked, seem worthless, seem pointless, and a rather waste of time.
I can't wait to hear it. Whatever it is, you've built it up so much.
Yes.
I'm on pins and needles.
So the most important question is, can you give me an internship position at the Flutter team?
I personally can't, unfortunately. However, there is a set of people who can at Google. And I would encourage anyone that wants to have an internship wherever, right? Whatever company it is, figure out what the process is, whether it's Apple or Facebook or Netflix or Amazon or Microsoft or Google or what your local Bank of America branch. I don't care. Wherever you decide is important for you, go and figure out what that process is. Go and figure out what they're looking for. Set up informational interviews. Talk to them about, hey, how do I, what stuff should I do to make me more attractive to, your company? What are you, what do I do? Who do you need? What can I, how do I get in there and figure that out? And LinkedIn is a fabulous resource for that, because you can just type the name of a company and find a bunch of people, and then you can spam them all and say, oh my God, I'm a student, I'm an intern, I think your company is the greatest thing ever. And I'd love to hear about what you do at your company. I'd love to hear about how I get in at your company. And 9 out of 10 of them will ignore you, and that's totally fine, because you want to talk to one of them that is passionate about helping you because somebody helped them. Right? Somebody was a mentor for them. Somebody helped them understand. This is the kind of thing you pay forward, right? That you really, the reason I'm here, right? I have a passion for students and developers and and college and lifelong learning and Flutter, right? So I'm here so that I can help the next generation. And those are the kinds of people you really want to find in whatever it is, the company or industry that you care about, and talk to them and figure out what it is that they need and how you can, go and build expertise in that area.
That's pretty amazing. So yeah, nice to hear that. So there's a chart that that Flutter is growing exponentially. It's the number of people using Flutter to build apps, the number of people downloading apps built by Flutter is increasing. And I want to show one chart so that talks about. And I just want to take your opinion on the chart on how the graph that shows how Flutter is increasing. So this is so mainly we want to focus on how it's increasing. Oh, hold on a second there. Well, hold, is that, no, where's the chart? This is total technical snafu here. Well, now that my resume is out, just want to scroll down and get your eyes on it, Chris. Just
yeah. Sure, look at that. That is a good looking resume. I really want to hire.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, that was me being a little sneaky, a little smart. Yeah. So, by the way, you're going to have this mailed at your doorstep, at your mailbox in about 2 to 5 business days.
Excellent. That'd be perfect.
Like $100 bill just inside this.
I have a bird cage that needs a lining at the bottom. So,
yeah, that's perfect. Well, we actually reached the end. That's pretty amazing. I can't stress how amazing it is to have you here, Chris. It's an honor, and we had a great time, and I'm sure the audience must have liked it too. Well, so this is pretty amazing. I want to thank you for taking your time out to come on our series. It's amazing to have you. And with that, I think we can finally call on Danny. And again, want to request everyone in the audience to give a round of applause for Chris, to show up here and give us time here and answer amazing questions and give amazing answers to the questions. So, Danny, over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment and thank you, Chris. I know you're a very busy man, but once again in the chat, let's go ahead and thank Chris for all the amazing questions. It was so great featuring you. With that, though, we're going to go ahead and look back at some of our previous apps that we built together throughout this entire Flutter series. So once again, let's go ahead and give a warm round of applause for Chris. Thank you so much for joining. We will see you next time for hopefully an amazing Fireside chat in the future.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. And so if you can feature the screen, so we can we just want to go over what apps you've built, so everyone who, if they're tuning in now, and if you have missed the apps that we have done on the in our series, you can have a quick look at it. So we started off our this is our 7th week, by the way. So in our 6th week, we started off with a Hello World app, and we just spoke about what Flutter is and built this very basic text widget here that shows text here. We spoke about the app bar. Then on week 2, we built our favorite celebrities app, which is just a basic list of 4 celebrities, and then there's a list of them. And then we spoke about like a column, and how do we scroll this column when it extends the screen. In our week 3, we spoke about Dart coding. So the UI was built for us. We just focused on the coding. We focused on how do we query different APIs. So we learned how to use the HTTP package to make those queries. And then in week 4, a dog quotes app, which is when we started to get into the intermediate level, and we built our here we have we spoke about like images and this carousel of images, this list style here. This was a little bit on the intermediate level, and then we did a short crash course to the amazing folks at Texas A&M, and this is just a UI. Louis Capaldi, as we all know, a famous singer-songwriter. We all love his songs. So we just built a simple app, just a UI for him. And finally, coming in towards the end, our second last app that we built was a currency converter, which we spoke about the aforementioned state management, the package, the provider package for implementing state management, where we stored all the currency information and had all the widgets take the data from this, from our main repository, you can say, from our main data source. And then finally, last Thursday is where we took one amazing dribble design from Muhammad Nofal, and we implemented it in Flutter. So this is a static UI, but we wanted to build a professional UI. So this is the 6 weeks that we've done. Now, all these videos are on the same YouTube channel, TOTV, Think Outside the Valley. You can find all the recordings there. And if you want to follow along with the recording, each app is always divided into starter and solution code. And each app is divided into multiple steps. So you will never get lost. You'll always have a helping hand. And now each starter code and solution code has to-dos. So in Android Studio or in VS Code, whatever you're using, just search for the to-do comments, and that'll tell you in detail what you have to implement. So everything is done in detail, documented as well as it could be. And the videos are there that you can watch. So that's a quick recap of what we've done to the series. And now over to you, Danny.
Wow. So I don't know if I could have nodded along as quickly as I should have for all of the amazing hard work that you've done, as well as everyone on the stream who have come back, week over week over week. One of the things I want to just, quickly mention here is, regardless of where you came in, knowing Flutter or not, right? You've stuck in with us through this entire series. But what's great about it is this isn't the only developer series we're going to feature, right? There's going to be amazing, talks upcoming for us to introduce amazing Google products, right? Beyond just Flutter. So number one, make sure you have a like to this video. Number two, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Number three, share all of this amazing content via the Flutter playlist, the beginner and intermediate, playlist series with your friends, right? Let's make sure that all of the amazing work Rohan's done teaching y'all this new skill can be passed along to all of our friends, perhaps a colleague, who knows, maybe even someone you haven't spoken to in a couple years. This might be the perfect opportunity to re-strike up that conversation and say, hey, have you heard anything about Flutter? You should check it out. So that being said, Rohan, I just want to, again, thank you so much for all of this amazing work. Myself and Madusha, we both have nicknames from the movie Top Gun, and as you were going through that amazing interview with Chris, right, your nickname kind of just popped out to me. So I want to, give it to you real quick. You are Iceman. Right. You did such a good job with that interview. The flow of it was really great. And, I'm pretty sure everyone following along, including myself, was, had their notebooks open and taking notes. I personally had a doc open and was quickly trying to type, because a little easier for me with my older hands, but it was amazing. Right. And I just want to, again, thank you for all of this hard work. Everyone in the chat, let's give one last round of applause for Rohan.
Thank you.
And with that, thank you all so much for joining us. We will see you at the next video.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.